Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to a video called How Europe's Replacing Planes with Trains. So this looks very interesting. I know that the train system in Europe, at least that's my understanding, is pretty good. So it's not a surprise to me that they're they're trying to replace it, which I think, because I think it's more like cost efficient and I think probably they're faster and cheaper. I don't know. But let's check it out and comment, like and subscribe.
This is the Berlin-Palermo Railway Axis, a planned 2,200 kilometer long high-speed rail line between Berlin and Palermo. It's designated as one of the main transport links connecting Central and Southern Europe, tracking through Germany, Austria and Italy. It will be priority project number 1 of 30 from the newly updated Trans-European Transport Network Plan, which is part of a grand vision by the EU Green Deal to make all scheduled travel of 500 kilometers or less carbon neutral by 2030 and reduce transport emissions by 90% by 2050. The idea is that if Europe can create a network of modern, super fast and comfortable trains going between every major city and member states, like this, then it can replace planes for these short to medium distance travel times. Trains, particularly electric passenger trains, are obviously the way to go for this solution. Even accounting for use of fossil fuels in power generation, trains
Yeah, I want to know because it's electrical trains, right? So do trains also consume a lot of they leave a very heavy carbon footprint, I think. I don't know, maybe it's because airplanes are heavier and maybe it's just less. I don't know, but I would be super curious to know what's the actual carbon footprint of those electrical trains, because I mean, apparently they know what they're doing. It's more ecological, but I would love to know the actual explanation why.
Average about a fifth of the greenhouse gas emissions per passenger kilometer of airplanes and less than half that of buses. Take, for example, Lisbon to Madrid, separated by 624 kilometers. A flight would emit 109 kilograms of CO2, while rail only 23. That's an insane 474% difference. Yet somehow there's no direct train between the two adjacent capitals. So while a plane would just take an hour and 30 minutes of travel, the 3 connecting train journeys would take around 9 hours. This is where the Madrid-Extremadura high-speed rail line will come in. Linking Madrid and Badajoz, a city close to the Portuguese border, it will eventually be expanded to connect to Lisbon by 2030 via connections to Alvas and Evora. A Madrid-Lisbon line by high-speed rail would cut the current 9-hour train ride to just 2.5, which would actually be shorter than flying when you take into account all the driving and waiting that comes with airports. We've seen this pan out with other lines already. The Eurostar carried nearly 80% of traffic from London to Brussels and Paris in 2019, while flights between Milan and Rome fell by more than half after a high-speed rail line opened in 2007. Now, while this is the main goal, replacing planes, it's also just about connecting Europe overall by train and giving more options for travel, regardless. For example, with the main line for Europe, it'll be going from Paris to Bratislava. That's a distance of 1,338 kilometers, which doesn't really make sense by train, but it means it'll be connecting big cities like Strasbourg, Stuttgart, Munich, and Vienna along the way. Crucial for maintaining being an alternative to planes for any journey whatsoever. It's the same with the Rail Baltica, which is priority project number 27. The 870-kilometer line will go from Warsaw all the way up to Tallinn, linking the capital cities of Baltic nations Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania to the rest of Europe by the way of the Polish capital by 2030. This is exactly what the Trans-European rail networks intend to do: connect Europe. The better European cities are connected by rail, the easier it is to move away from high-polluting transport modes such as aviation and cars. But even further, people need to be more incentivized to use rail. 17 of the 20 most frequented air routes in Europe are for distances less than 700 kilometers. In theory, almost all of these journeys could be shifted to rail. Now, don't get me wrong, the EU already has over 200,000 kilometers of rail infrastructure across the bloc, and many of its countries have some of the best rail systems in the world. But it's actually not enough right now. I mean, only 11,000 kilometers of these tracks facilitate high-speed rail, and as a result, it isn't used as much as it could be, which I know sounds crazy to say about European countries, considering how far ahead they are in rail ridership than almost anywhere else. But while the number of passenger kilometers traveled on the EU's railways rose from 340 billion in 2001 to 413 billion in 2018, rail's overall share of journeys has barely moved, increasing from 6.7% to 7%. In the
So what's
same
happening
period,
there?
air travel's share rose from 6.1% to 9.6% of all European journeys by passenger kilometers. Even in the most train-happy countries such as Austria and the Netherlands, for example, the figures are just 13% and 11%.
So
Now,
what do we
there's a
want
few
for that?
reasons for this, but I believe most of them stem from this. High-speed rail links haven't truly been prioritized in all of Europe, let alone cross-border ones. In 2018, the European Commission found that out of 365 cross-border rail links that had once existed, 149 were non-operational. You see, rail is the form of
okay.
transport that requires possibly the most coordination, and on a continent split into dozens of
course,
countries,
you have so
there's
many
bound to be
countries.
tons of problems. Compatibility is a perfect example of this. Europe may have thousands of rail lines, but they're not all created equally. Europe's electric railways use 4 different voltage levels, while signaling and safety systems are even
Oh my
worse,
God,
given
okay.
almost every country initially had its own. Even the tracks themselves vary. For example, the Baltic countries use Russia's wider gauge,
Oh
and
my
Spain
God,
and Portugal have one of their own. The European Rail Agency has been gradually enforcing
Yeah, shouldn't they just use the
specifications
same
since
thing?
1996, but there's still a long way to go in adjusting the current ones or just creating new tracks.
I can
But
imagine something
besides
a
that,
nightmare.
even when international high-speed lines have been built, often at enormous cost, national
Oh,
loyalties,
yes, I can't
clashing
imagine the
regulations, and bureaucratic hurdles lurking around at pretty much every corner are preventing these routes from fulfilling their potential. The lack of unification also goes beyond the physical world and reaches the digital realms of ticket purchasing sites. Although some
that's
privately
the
owned
easy part, I
websites
think.
already facilitate the sale of cross-border train tickets, there's not even a single united ticketing system yet. The process usually requires customers to go through different national rail websites. Even after the purchase, passengers traveling on various national companies are not guaranteed their connection if the first train from a different railway
Oh, of
company
course,
is
because
running
it's
late.
coordinated,
Of course,
yeah.
these things will eventually be fixed. But as
Yeah.
a result, currently, you basically end up with countries like Spain and France that have extensive national railway networks, such as the AVE and TGV, yet have remained largely focused on domestic markets for decades.
Yeah, everyone does it in
Cross-border
their own
trips
country.
are basically just a side business and nuisance to them. So going from one country to the other usually means creeping along some old-fashioned tracks. Then there's the financial aspect that pretty much goes hand in hand with this problem. When I said these high-speed lines have been built at an enormous cost, I wasn't exaggerating in the slightest. Despite the fact the EU is budgeting a total of $100 billion worth of rail from 2021 to
Oh my God, that's a lot of
2027,
money.
it's not close to being enough when high-speed tracks
Oh my God, it's
cost
even
more
more
than $42
expensive.
million per kilometer. On most routes, countries would actually be better off improving their conventional networks according to the European Court of Auditors. As a result, high-speed rail tickets typically cost far more than a budget airfare on the same route, which again contributes to not enough people
That's
using
crazy to
rail.
me.
A 2019 climate survey of almost 30,000 people by the European Investment Bank found that 62% of Europeans support a ban on short-haul flights, with the main obstacle being prices.
A
So
ban?
the more attractive and easy to use rail services are, the more likely it is that people will want to switch. We
Yeah,
know
of
this
course.
because we've seen the effects of cheap
Yeah.
public transport. If you take, for example, the €9 ticket that Germany offered during the summer of 2022, in which passengers could travel for €9 per month on local and regional transport in all of Germany. It
That
was
was
a
just
wild
€9,
success.
of
Over
course.
52 million tickets were sold over the 3-month period and saved
course.
1.8 million tons of CO2, almost as much as a 130 km per hour speed limit on the autobahns would achieve in an entire year. Now, of course, this €9 ticket didn't include high-speed rail, but one could imagine that if it did, the results would be even more insane. Couple
Or
this
just-
with the fact that the EU plans to double their high-speed rail traffic by 2030 and triple it by 2050, there can really be a set pathway to becoming the world's first carbon-neutral continent by 2050, as the
That's
EU aims to do. So
completely
what's happening
crazy to
now,
me.
besides all these multi-year projects currently being built and targets being set? Well, even if the EU is decades off from reaching its targets, they're still addressing the problems without having a fully connected high-speed rail system being ready. A growing number of countries have plans to phase out short-haul flights that can be completed by train in a given time frame, and France has recently
What's the
become the
time
world's
frame?
first major economy to do so, enacting
Oh,
a
really?
nationwide ban on short-haul domestic flights on
Oh, they
routes where
did it.
train journeys of 2.5 hours or less exist as an alternative. Well, kinda. As a first step, flights will be
Okay.
prohibited on just 3 routes from Paris's secondary airport.
And see how it
Orly
goes.
to Bordeaux, Lyon, and Nantes. And as
Okay.
rail improves, so will the amount of banned flights. There has also been a rise of the air rail connections, meaning instead of a traveler making the usual dash from flight to flight, a small but growing number connect to or from a train for one leg of their journeys. It's again sort of a band-aid on the problem, but it's something.
yeah, I don't
That's
like
the
that.
thing, though. No one policy is going to solve the whole problem. You
Yeah,
get
you have to
half a
tackle
percent here,
everything.
a 1/10% there. But when you do things bit by bit, the result adds up. That is the way for the EU reaching its climate goals and finally changing from no more than a patchwork of national systems to a transport-united Europe. Thank you for watching.
Well, this was incredible. I think it was they want to be like carbon, like the carbon footprint is going to be zero. I think that's their goal for by 2050, I think, which I think it's crazy. Like they're going to become like the first continent. Well, that's the goal. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen, but I love the ambitious. And if ever, like, if anyone can do that, I think they already have like a pretty good like base, I think. The basics are there. Obviously, not everything. I do like the fact that if you see it like that and they're like explaining the whole thing, it's like, oh my god, they're not going to achieve this. They have like so many things, but it's like, no, I like that. Obviously, that's how it should be. Like long-term projects like that of like, it's a huge thing that they have to tackle. I do like that they're obviously like they have like little goalposts of just by 2030, like this is what should happen, and probably they have like a few of them there are probably a little bit like by 2025 this should happen, by 2030 this, by 2035, like they're obviously like it's separated in like little milestones, because obviously if you put it like the whole it's gonna be like in 2050, it's like, okay, everyone's gonna be like, no, absolutely not. But I think if you put it like in short-term goals of like 10 years, 5 years, but for a project like this, that's shorter term, and I think it's gonna be super achievable. I think the cost are the craziest thing to me. Is like, I knew that it was expensive, but I wasn't imagining it to be like that expensive. It's like the 100 billion, it's not enough. It's like, no, it's not even remotely enough. It's like, wow, really? I think, again, because I don't really know, like, I get, it's like, well, it's going to be very expensive, because obviously that's the cost. And if you have to like build this incredible like train tracks, and it's the train tracks and it's the trains and it's the railway system in general, I don't think that's obviously like that's not gonna be cheap. But I don't know, like it still was shocking to me, like the amount of money that they need to spend in order for this to work, because it's like, it's already a lot of money, and you're telling me it's not remotely enough. Like that's nothing. It's like, it's even expensive than that. But I think, again, if you invest on it, like the long term, probably like not the profit, but it's gonna be worth it. It's gonna be a good investment, even though it sounds like a lot of money. It is, but it's gonna be better in long term. The whole like €9 ticket, Germany did it. I don't really understand like why they did it just for a summer. I mean, maybe they were just like a trial period to see like if it's gonna work. Of course it worked. People were gonna be like, yes, now we're traveling. It was all domestic, like in Germany, as if I get now that most trains do just, it's all domestic. Like few of them actually do have the whole like, we're going to different countries, and that's why obviously that's the problem. But even if it's just in Germany, €9 per month, like that's crazy. Even though it was, I think probably, if I understood it correctly, it was just like 1 month. Like it wasn't even like for the whole summer. But people were like, a million tickets sold. Yes, of course. If I'd been there, I'd be like, well, prepare to travel. Like this month, we're actually gonna know like so many like different cities, because I would have taken advantage of this. Of course, it's just like €9, and it wasn't like even the high speed one. I'm wondering if it was because it was gonna be a little bit more expensive, because of course it's a high speed train. But even if the cost, well, like I don't know, I have no idea how it costs. But maybe if it had been like, I don't know, 20 or 15 euros, I think the tickets would have flown by like just the same, because again, it's so cheap. It's like, who cares? Just put price it at the high speed train at like 20. People are still gonna be, or 25. People are still gonna be flocking towards, because of course it's gonna be like, compared to one ticket that I don't know how much it costs, but it's obviously gonna be, I think in my mind, it's obviously gonna be like more expensive. Of course, it's a great deal. People, of course, are going to make use of it. So it's like, we say that's like a trial period, but why if it worked, how come they didn't really do it permanently? Or maybe that's what they're planning on doing in the future. Maybe they have to like make some adjustments. But I would love to see them just, implementing that €9 thing, or maybe price it out at like 11, 12, 15, I don't know, whatever it is, but it's going to be like cheaper, and people, of course, are going to prefer that. I think it's also like a little bit insane to me that people, because again, you hear like in Europe, everything's between like driving distance, and it's all a thing about like, oh yeah, it compares especially to the US, that is huge, and you can be still, you're driving for like 10 hours and you're still in the same place, you're still in the same state. In Europe, you can be like, no, I drove 10 hours, now I found myself, now I got to Poland. It's a little bit like that. But it's crazy, because I don't know why I had the idea that, the trains actually like did, the trains also like went to different countries. But it's like, this video is making me see like, no, people actually do use their cars, or they still, they use planes. I want to know how many, like, do people prefer going by car, or do they prefer going by actual plane? Because I would think, yeah, if it's for a weekend, I would think like I'm choosing the plane, because obviously I want to go for the weekend, which I think is obviously one of the great advantages of Europe. If you're in Madrid and you want to go and visit Rome, is like, well, for the weekend, is like, of course I'm going to choose like a plane ticket, because I only have it's an overnight stay. I'm going for the weekend. So I'm not going to obviously travel there by car, because it's going to take, it's going to take longer. So do people actually like, but I know that some people actually do use, like they say, like the Autobahn, although that's only in Germany. But again, maybe it's just, if it isn't just, it's just domestic flights. They put that example of like an international flight. But maybe if you're traveling within like the same country, do people actually prefer in general to travel more by car or by plane? I would think it depends, because again, if you're going for like a short visit, probably people prefer obviously the plane. But if you're maybe during the summer, maybe you have like a few days off, maybe you're like, well, no, I can do the driving, because it's, it's going to be, I think I prefer the driving, but I get it. Just, I don't, I think I prefer it, but it's just, again, it depends. Everything's just so very depending on what your travel plans are, because if you have a short amount of time, of course, I'm not going to waste it just by going there by car. I want to go by plane. But at the same time, I think driving is such a like great, I good experience of just like, you're seeing all the different cities and you can stop by. And I know it's not very like carbon foot friendly. It's not a very ecological thing of me to say, but that's where the trains come in, because of course I can choose to travel by train and to do it like, oh, I like the city and I'm making a stop here. Maybe I'm staying for a day and then I'll leave tomorrow. So it is kind of like the sort of like the equivalent of a car, of course, because we're trying to be more eco-friendly. So yes, that's where the trains come in. But I do wonder, because they like the example that they put, if like, I think it's Portugal and Spain, if I'm remembering correctly, the amount, like the travel distance, like it's gonna take you, I think, like it's gonna be even less time than if you'd have flown there, because of course they're very close by. Yes, they're different countries, but they're like, the cities are very close. So if when that train is implemented at that sort of like the train, because it hasn't been implemented, when that railway is in place, it's gonna take you like less time than actually, by going by train, that, traveling there by plane. And I'm guessing those are like high-speed trains, if I understood it correctly. But if I didn't, it's going to be, wow. So it's just a normal train. So imagine what a high-speed train could do. But I think I understood it correctly. And it was just like a high-speed train. And yes, the traveling distance, the traveling, time is going to be cut in, like, I think probably like half, which is crazy, because of course it's like, you have to take into account that even if the plane is going to go faster. Yes, of course, I hadn't thought of this, because it's like, yes, you have to drive to the airport. And, even though you do like your check-in early and all of those things, you're still going to waste a little bit of time there in the airport, because it's not as something that I get there and the plane's going to be waiting for me. Like, no, there's some time that needs to pass. Maybe you're missing out on like 20 minutes, half an hour. And if you're traveling, obviously by train, it's a little bit like the process is a little bit of just like, getting there and that's it. I also wonder like whether those trains, like the capacity of the trains compared to airplanes, because of course an airplane, I think you could make the case of like, well, yeah, it's faster. But there's like maybe how many flights do you have a day? Is it like 3, 2, 1, just one? And how many people can actually fit in the airplane? So I don't really know, because obviously maybe it's going to be like a smaller airplane, and maybe 300 people. Like, how many people can you move around by day? And that compared to the trains, because I think the trains are probably the capacity, I think it's bigger. I think maybe I'm totally off by this, but I would think like the trains are just like larger in general. So I think they fit more people, so they can probably like mobilize more people. But again, maybe it just depends on the type of train, and maybe I'm totally off. And it's like, no, because obviously it's the same thing. Like the trains are just going to be just one a day, or maybe just, but I would assume that it's just like at least two, like one goes and the other turns around. I don't know, maybe, or maybe they have like like 2 trains because it's not the same one. So you have like 2 or 3 trains. So it would be like the same as the airplane, you know, as the airplanes, as the flights. But I think it's a very interesting situation. That yes, it's going to cost a lot of money, but I think it's going to be worth it. And by they say yes, they have a long way to go because obviously coordinating the whole like different. I had no idea that. I thought that was regulated. Like they all use like the same voltage and they use the same like train tracks. I don't know why I thought it'd be because it was like, oh, it's the European Union. Like I think everyone has the same, like by regulation, everyone has the same sort of like the same mandates, but apparently it's not like that at all. And it's like, no, a lot of countries have different sort of regulations in place. So of course that's going to be like the hardest part. It's just like coordinating and sort of like, you know, making it all the same basically, which is going to be the hardest part. But I guess, like I said, the payoff is like a really good payoff. So it's definitely worth it. And they mentioned like, oh, they don't really have like a whole platform in place or an app where you can just, you know, get a train from Moscow to London, not London, obviously London's an island, but at least in an island, but so bad example, but you know, I don't know, Moscow to, I don't know, to Amsterdam. So it is like, you, of course, at some point that's going to be, you know, it's going to be like the same platform, the same app. But I would think that's probably the easiest part, like compared to everything they have to do, all the bureaucracy they have to like put in place of like, yes, you know, you use this electricity or this voltage and we use another and the train track is like this and we have to repair it and whatever. So compared to all of those things, I think this is just a small apples, like the building an app that works for everyone and throughout like all Europe. That's the easy part, I think. But you know, especially because the others, and it's gonna take longer. Obviously, they have to like actually do repairs, physical repairs, and physical sort of like maintenance or something in the actual like train tracks compared to like the whole thing that is just like a digital situation. But yes, I would love to see. I hopefully, I have no doubt in my mind they're gonna make it. But yes, I want to go. I want to know where they are in 2030, and of course in 2050 if they actually manage it. And yeah, maybe they do it even earlier. I know, who knows? But yes, excited to see like what's going to become from this and what the future has in store. But that was it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.